Hey, before this video starts, I wanna announce part 1 of my 1k, well, almost 2k sub special. Part 1 out of 2 will be a Q&A, so if you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the comments. Anyways, onto the video itself. As you probably already know, it has been a month since I last talked about Harman Smith, and I kinda crashed out at him last time. And I recently made a poll to see if you all would want to see a new video response to Harman Smith, and by a large percentage of 85% with 81 votes, I see that you all want to see another Harman Smith video. And today he crashed out at PC Gamers, saying that the Switch 2 outperformed their biggest games. And knowing Harman, it can only be interesting, and with interesting I mean stupid and painful. Let's go.
PC gamers are crashing out. They're upset. They're seething because Nintendo is taking measures to prevent people from playing pirated games on Nintendo Switch 2. So you can't emulate Switch 2 games, you can't hack your Switch 2, you can't mod it to play games with like the MTG cards or whatever.
Okay, we can already tell that he's in pure denial. First of all, it doesn't matter if Nintendo does take measures. Those people are like hydras. You chop off one head, two new heads grow in its place. Also, I notice he still thinks that emulation would be the same thing as piracy, which is just stupid. Emulation in gaming, as its purest definition, means that a console takes the properties of an older console software-wise, and emulation as itself is legal. And even the courts themselves ruled that it is legal. Also, if emulation would be illegal and it would be piracy, then Nintendo would also be full of pirates. Because for Super Mario 64 and Super Mario 3D All-Stars, they used an emulator. The Switch 2 uses the code of an emulator as well, so now that you know that, pick a side. You can't be against it for everyone except Nintendo, otherwise you once again just have a moral convenience. And it's funny that you say that the Switch 2 can't be hacked, since it got hacked day 1, which would even be a contestant for a world record of fastest code breach for a gaming console, I think. About the cards, I can't say too much though, since I'm not too well versed with those cards, but honestly, given how much of a Nintendo Meat Rider Harman is, it doesn't surprise me that he would be in denial for those other things.
You know, all these people seriously thought they were going to get their consoles and like hack it immediately.
And people hacked the Switch 2 day 1 because of one big reason. Nintendo challenged the internet. You see, Nintendo claimed that the Switch 2 would be unhackable, which is something of a way of saying to the internet that the people there can go suck it and that they can't hack it. Which is the biggest mistake Nintendo could have made. When you challenge the internet like that, then you can expect that people will take it upon themselves to prove you wrong. Look, I don't support the people who do that, but Nintendo brought it upon themselves this time, that is for certain.
And here we are, Nintendo just bricking them, online. That's kind of interesting to kind of see how this is developed.
I agree with you for all the wrong reasons. It's interesting to see Nintendo doing something like this, since it just deliberately pushes people to piracy or to abandon Nintendo altogether.
Because these people are so open about what they do, it's very possible at this point, considering like the internet and how this stuff is like interconnected with like how you have to like connect to the internet to like update the initial day 1 patches and stuff like that. Like, it seems as if Nintendo's now in a position where, like, every time someone, like, tries, like, doing something like this, they try pirating a game, they can just, like, oops, time to brick that console, time to shut down that guy's account, time to, send the cops after him, time to prosecute, Like, there's just so many things they can do with as they continue expanding their anti-piracy measures. And it is glorious to see.
So let me get this straight. You support Nintendo bricking people's consoles. Okay, so this goes out to you, Harman, and those other Nintendo fanboys like Verslefy and all those others. Are you all completely off the deep end? Yes, deleting the Nintendo account is understandable, since it breaks the Nintendo account TOS, but breaking the Nintendo Switch 2 completely? Just no. Nintendo deserved the shitstorm they got for this decision. It is the most anti-consumer thing thing there is. And here you and those other fanboys are defending them for this bad decision. I seriously can't wrap my head around why you would defend Nintendo for that. That just shows me personally that Harman and those others are just people who would defend Nintendo no matter what. Even though being a fan would also mean criticizing the company for stupid decisions. That just shows me that Harman and those others are just grifters. I mean, they also defended Nintendo for making their games $80. Honestly, what am I supposed to say here?
And you're seeing a lot of people crashing out about this because they know that without piracy, they have like no justification at all.
Yo, I'm gonna let you finish, but ding dong!
So I just did some research on the MIG switch. It's in fact a legal thing, since you have to get a physical copy of the game to back it up to a MIG switch. That means that it in fact is not piracy, so Nintendo is in fact banning people that legally, mind you, legally buy their games. And that is unfortunately why so many people now turn to piracy. It is Nintendo's fault there, because of either their incompetence or their greed or a combination of both. So Harman, before you accuse something of piracy, do some research first, please.
You know, they're giant cope that they don't need Nintendo consoles to play Nintendo games.
Which is true, by the way. You don't need Nintendo consoles to play Nintendo games. But I of course won't tell what those alternatives are because of Nintendo themselves.
Has completely blown up in their face. You know, this is why they're like, you know, trying to act as if like NSO isn't a big deal because like, well, I could just emulate that, you know.
Why should we care about a service that Nintendo probably doesn't even give a shit about? I'm gonna be honest, I to this day think that it should be illegal for Nintendo to charge people so much for such a shitty service. Their libraries on retro games are in fact worse than emulators since you can't speed up the games, so you have to sit through them with normal speed, which intro sequences that for GBA games for example partially go pretty long. And don't even get me started on the online multiplayer through NSO. It's one of the biggest pieces of garbage I have seen in a long while. It seriously runs like it's on a dial-up connection, so please don't try to bring up Nintendo Switch Online. It's an argument that can be disputed in minutes.
Completely not understanding the fact that like a game being older doesn't stop it being piracy, you know?
You know how emulation can be used as well, right? It can also be used for preservation of older games. There have been many cases where retro games have by now become lost media, just because the ROMs weren't preserved. And Nintendo, with shutting that whole thing with ROMs down, does inevitably lead to many retro games becoming lost media. Is that what you want, Harman? Because to be honest, that is not what I want.
And it's very interesting to see like the continued like coping and seething about this. You know, even like going so far as to say it's unethical, anti-consumer, I should say, to brick pirated like Nintendo consoles or like modded. It's amazing to see.
If it is just a cope, then why is Nintendo getting sued for doing exactly that? Yes, you heard that right. While making this video, Nintendo got sued in Brazil for bricking people's Switch 2 units. Because the Brazilian government also determined that tactic as abuse. And I know Harman and those other fanboys are probably gonna say that it is normal that they pirate in Brazil since it is a third world country. Even then, the lawsuit is still justified. The Switch 2 in Brazil, when being transitioned to US dollars, is worth $5,000. That's a goddamn fortune. Also, if that lawsuit goes through, there is a chance that the US or the European Union would be also following suit and start suing Nintendo. And if Nintendo would get sued by those other big world countries, they will probably won't be able to come back from that, since Nintendo will get astronomical fines. Really, don't underestimate the government of a third world country. They can also influence the courts of the biggest countries.
Like the PC Master Race is running scared because I think this is a very good example of just what the collapse of PC gaming is going to look like. Where the PC gamers, instead of playing games on their platforms, are spending all of their time like seething about Nintendo hardware. Seething about the game, seething about like, Bonanza, seething about like what Nintendo was doing, about the Power World lawsuit, like doing everything except actually playing games on PC.
Oh, you little hypocrite. You know that this is your entire channel, but in reverse? Instead of playing your precious little Nintendo exclusives, you just go on YouTube and you just cope and seethe by saying that insert popular game title would be inferior to Nintendo exclusive X, Y, and Z. Just for the last 7 days, you have made 14 videos. Seriously, just log off for a week and go play your Nintendo exclusives instead of constantly meat-riding Nintendo. You don't have to constantly go out of your way to defend Nintendo, because this essentially just shows to me that you are being insecure about being a Nintendo fan. Otherwise, you won't be so defensive.
Like, I've already seen people, like, make videos about DK Bonanza trying to damage control it. Like, I don't know if it's out yet. Like, huh?
Great self-report there, Harman. For the people who don't get it, Garaaoftherage did a Salty Sunday livestream, and he was asking himself if Donkey Kong Bonanza had already released. Garaaoftherage is another salt miner YouTuber who made videos on Harman or, for example, Reforged Gaming. And the little side clap there just shows me that Gara just lives rent-free in Harman's head. I mean, he's the only salt miner so far that Harman had made a video about. Just let that sink in for a moment. Gara is the only guy who managed to rip into Harman so much that he just lives free in Harman's head. That is just amazing.
Like, it's just downright absurd seeing how many people are desperately trying to do everything they possibly can to downplay Nintendo, to hate Nintendo, to despise Nintendo, to do everything they can to, like, continue this farce.
Trust me, Harman, we don't even have to try to find reasons to hate Nintendo. Nintendo is literally spoon-feeding us with reasons to see them as a terrible company. From false DMCAs to the bricking of consoles that they are doing now. And they're even starting to brick people's consoles when a person has a bad username, in their point of view at least. The latest instance I had heard of was that they bricked the console of a guy who named himself Twink Link.
You serious?
I am not even kidding when saying that. Here's the screenshot proof for this. I don't know why Nintendo seemed to think that Twink Link was too risky for a username. It is a perfectly acceptable one, and a funny one even. Okay, I kinda lied there. I have a possible explanation for this. It was making fun of one of their IPs, so they bricked that guy's console because it hurt Nintendo's feelings. So, no, we are not trying to find reasons to hate Nintendo, Harman. Nintendo is actively giving us the reasons.
That Nintendo Switch 2 is not successful. Like, I've seen all sorts of copes. This idea that, like, sales are going to taper off, or that third-party sales aren't doing well, or that, like, the hardware is faulty. None of which is true, but these are all narratives and conspiracies that are, like, going along through PC gaming circles,
Gotcha, fuckface.
You are now once again trying to lie to your own audience, Harman. About the third-party sales, we don't have solid evidence, but we can say that the Switch 2 doesn't handle games very well, to say the least. With the Nintendo exclusives, the frame rate is so inconsistent that people had to put the games into an emulator to even get the games to a consistent 60 FPS. And with the third-party games, it is just a Switch thing all over again. Take Cyberpunk, for example. It barely runs consistently because the Switch 2's hardware is just not advanced enough to run the games properly. So with the hardware thing, you are just blatantly lying because you yourself made a negative review on Cyberpunk on Switch 2. So you are now trying to twist your own arguments from there to make a flimsy point for Nintendo.
Like, this is the giant cope that they have to try and justify, like, PC gaming being the most popular platform on the market, which is of course ridiculous and makes no sense because of course PC and console gaming coexist, you know, like one or the other doing well doesn't really diminish the success of the other, but like good luck getting PC gamers to realize that like PC gaming existing is not a threat to Nintendo consoles at all.
So you know that both Nintendo and PC can coexist, yet you still decide to go after non-Nintendo IPs. Yet you want to call the PC gamers out for doing the exact same thing? Harman, do you have any self-awareness? Because I highly doubt that by now. And now admitting that you know that those things can coexist, it just makes your takes look more pathetic in hindsight.
Because, you know, anybody who owns a PC can also own a Nintendo console. It's not some complicated thing, you know, like, you know, just not like how mobile didn't kill Nintendo, like PC gaming isn't going to kill Nintendo. You know, they are going to coexist because they're all completely different and offer different experiences for different people.
True, I absolutely agree there, but the blatant hypocrisy that is coming out of the gaping hole in your face, I swear, it is just rustling my jimmies. And also, I now notice something that doesn't make sense to me looking back. If Nintendo can coexist with the other consoles, then why wouldn't they make their exclusives multi-platform? I mean, it would make Nintendo more money in the long run, but the reason for that is that Nintendo probably already knows that if their games aren't exclusives anymore, their consoles probably wouldn't even sell half as much. Let's face it, most people just buy the Switch 2 for the exclusives, and if Nintendo doesn't have their exclusives anymore, they will just come crashing down.
But that's not the way that, like, the PC community, like, sees it, you know? They think that they'll be able to continue getting away with pirating Nintendo games indefinitely. That, like, you know, every time that, like, Nintendo releases, like, a game that they have to play, like Zelda or Mario or whatever, like, that they could just pirate it. But, like, that is already becoming, like, ludicrously difficult to do. You know? It's already becoming, like, more and more, like, challenging to pull off. And what's more, and I think this is the more important thing, like, it's beginning to have a bit of a stigma to it. You know, like, that's the thing about this. Because, like, obviously, if you like this stuff, you want to give Nintendo money so you can get more of it. You know, this idea that, like, well, I get it for free, like, you're not supporting the developer. So, like, you know, good luck, like, getting new games if you're, like, pirating everything all the time.
I assume you are talking about the MIG Switch, and again, I will repeat this until you get it through your thick skull, Harman. You have to buy a legal copy of the game to load it onto a MIG Switch, so people who are using the MIG Switch are financially supporting the creator. If it would be piracy with the MIG Switch, it would be that the person would load a ripped ROM from the internet to play it for free. That would be piracy. The MIG Switch isn't piracy due to the fact that a pirated copy cannot be loaded onto the cartridge. Seriously, Harman, you can find that out with a 5-second Google search, but research or showing proof is something you apparently don't want to do. You just seem to assume that your source, which is just trust me bro, would work, which just isn't. You have to show screenshot evidence to back up your claims. I mean, I know you can edit, so I don't know why you seem to think that the source trust me bro would work for you.
But, you know, the PC gaming community, you know, they don't care about that. You know, they just cope and seethe and just, like, make excuses as to why they have to pirate and why they can't buy it legit.
Funny that you say this, Harman, because in fact most PC gamers are actively telling people to not pirate games. They are actively telling the people to get the games in a legal way. Seriously, Harman, stop trying to get those cheap digs at the PC gaming community. It is just embarrassing to look at.
And it's just resulted in, like, this this circle jerk that just, like, that seems to, like, try and like justify the piracy of, like, every Nintendo game that comes out. You know, because, like, every single time they try to say the game, like, doesn't run well or doesn't look good, or that, like, Nintendo's doing something unethical and that's why they have to pirate things. You know, like, you see this all the time. everywhere.
Once again, we are not trying to pirate games, we are still trying to get the games legally, but due to Nintendo's unethical business tactics that you are now desperately trying to deny, people are getting pushed further and further into piracy. And that's unfortunate, because we all agree that developers should get supported financially, especially in such a bad time like nowadays. But due to what Nintendo is doing, people are getting more and more uncomfortable with financially supporting Nintendo. But still, most PC gamers are still not supporting piracy, because it is just morally wrong, so don't try to make it look as if everyone in the PC gaming community would be a pirate.
And people are beginning to notice like the patterns, specifically how these people don't really know all that much about Nintendo or its characters or its brand, like...
Oh, I'm getting some serious deja vu with that argument. I think he brought the exact same argument in the first video where I talked about him, so I'm just gonna quickly repeat what I said. Nintendo is such a monolith by now, everyone has heard about this company, so your argument is flimsy once again.
Every single time these guys have come out and like try and say something about, say, the intermission tracks in Mario Kart World. Right, like, oh man, like the intermission tracks are so boring. They're straight lines. Like, first of all, like anybody who plays the game will tell you that's not true.
You are made of stupid.
But second of all, like those of us who have played older games will realize that aren't the highway tracks in Mario Kart World like the same thing as like Mount Wario in Mario Kart 8, which coincidentally was one of the most popular stages in that game.
That's the fucking point!
But does that make the recycling good just because Mount Wario was one of the most popular racetracks in a past Mario Kart game? No, of course not. Also, you just contradicted yourself once again. You say that the intermission tracks wouldn't be boring, yet now you say it makes sense that Nintendo will be recycling Mount Wario? I don't know how you all see it, but recycling a racetrack in Mario Kart sounds boring to me, because it just shows that they just milk a racetrack just because it was popular. Also, please, Harman, cut out the dead air in your videos. It is getting annoying by now.
Like this idea that you have to go around a circle 3 times in order to have a real Mario Kart track. Like it has no merit, like historically. Like it's just something that people tried to make into a controversy with this game and just kind of like imploded, as people played it and realized that it was a complete non-issue.
Nice argument, Senator. Why don't you back it up with a source?
My source is that I made it the fuck up.
Where in the world did you see people complain that Mario Kart doesn't rely on the lab approach? Because from what I have seen, people have been very positive with that new approach. I mean, maybe people on 4chan told you this to get a rise out of you, because Harman has admitted on his own accord that he visits 4chan. But I cannot know. He once again doesn't bother to pull up any sources.
And this is just the common pattern when it comes to PC gaming discourse. 2 years ago, right, with Baldur's Gate 3, or before that with Elden Ring, the narrative was oh, these games are way better than anything that's ever going to come out on Nintendo hardware. And then Tears of the Kingdom has outperformed Elden Ring now, and Elden Ring is coming to Nintendo Switch 2 anyway.
I'm sorry, but are you still bitter about Elden Ring? When will you finally get over it? No, Elden Ring was dimensions better than Tears of the Kingdom, especially when it comes to the story, since Elden Ring has multiple endings, and most of them are rather bad, while Tears of the Kingdom always has the same ending, which is, yay, you saved Hyrule! I'm sorry, but I want at least one Zelda game that might have multiple endings depending on the decision you make as a player. It will be a nice change of pace. It is the reason why Majora's Mask is my favorite Zelda game. It has a dark, brooding, foreboding tone, and it gives depth to the smallest characters. It made you feel as if your actions mattered, as if you actually had a world to save due to the sheer amount of detail being crammed into every character. Another game like that would be really a delight.
So again, all that hype, all that publicity, all that worship for Elden Ring just completely imploded. Even if it was better than Tears of the Kingdom, it is not.
Stop the cap.
It's coming to Nintendo Switch 2 anyway. So it's not some weapon you can use against Nintendo. You know, like Baldur's Gate 3, in spite of all the hype behind it, hasn't had the same kind of cultural impact that that people thought it would. It's only popular with like 30 to 40-year-old like butterball women children, right? Like, that's the Baldur's Gate 3 audience.
Where do you get all your infos, Harman? Because they're so out of touch with reality that it feels like a troll told you, or you ask generative AI to tell you that. When I was in 10th grade and Baldur's Gate 3 came out, half of my class was playing that game, and the many streamers who also play Baldur's Gate 3, they are not some, as you said, butterball women children. Okay, I should also say this in case you are thinking that Harman is just a troll. No, just look at his channel and how he reacts to certain things. He is the real deal. He is not rage baiting.
It just doesn't really have an appeal among like actual gamers.
Okay, Harman, let me make this abundantly clear. You are not what I consider a real gamer. You are what I deem a Nintendo fanboy. And even then, you would be one of the most casual gamers I have seen in a good while. But no, Harman, you'll never be considered a gamer due to your takes on games, constantly comparing things to Nintendo IPs. That is your legacy on YouTube. You'll always be a Nintendo fanboy and nothing else.
And that's the core issue with the PC, Nintendo, and mobile market, is that like Nintendo has a specific audience that has no interest in migrating to PC, no interest in migrating to mobile, and as a result of that, the consoles will remain successful indefinitely. They're constantly going to be pulling more people in. People are going to be trying their games and becoming fans. And, like, you're just not going to be able to downplay these games like you could back in the 90s.
Yes, people would like modern Nintendo exclusives if you would look at them in a vacuum. Seriously, if I would give a friend of mine a modern Nintendo exclusive, they would probably say that they like it. But once they would play a non-Nintendo exclusive, they would never want to go back to the Nintendo exclusive.
And I do think that's like the big takeaway from this. Seeing what's happened to Fire Emblem Engage, Tears of the Kingdom, and Super Mario Bros. Wonder in particular. Like, these were three of like the most wildly hated Nintendo games I've seen in years, and in a matter of like 2 years, not only have their reputation skyrocketed, you're also seeing like sales continue to go up because these games will always be available digitally. Like, people will be able to pick them up, whatever. People will be willing to try them or whatever. Like, the narrative that these games are bad is simply not going to stick because it's not really true.
Jesse, what the fuck are you talking about?
Like, Pokemon Scarlet and Violet is probably like the defining example of this. One of the most wildly hated like Pokemon games ever. I'm seeing more and more people like acknowledge that, like, yeah, this is one of my favorite generations. And I don't necessarily agree with that, but like, the more I play the game, the more I realize just how special and interesting it actually is. I love Gen 9, and I've always been an advocate for it. But for the longest time, we've been told that like, the game is broken and glitchy and there'll never be an update for it, bro. And guess what? It's here, and it's glorious.
What the fuck? This is probably the worst take you have had in a long time, Harman. Pokemon Scarlet and Violet were fundamentally broken when they came out. The games had graphic tears and frame dips everywhere, to the point where the frame rate went down to the single digits. But anyways, guys, the video is finally over. That was more than enough Harman Smith for a whole month, in my opinion. And honestly, I also have to apologize that this video here took so long to be uploaded. The reason why it took so long is the country I live in got hit by a heat wave and my room pretty much turned into a sauna, and it made recording almost impossible. Heck, I was so slow that Garaaoftherage was faster than me in uploading a video on the same topic. His video is of course linked in the description. And now we get to the credits. So thanks to Indominus Pack, Flame Plasmanian, Spino Blue, Gator Boy, Spinozilla 2005, Draken, and Unfortunate. Thanks for your great help in making the channel the way it is. And thanks to you all for watching this video, and I'll see you all in the next Cretaceous Critiques episode. Stay cold and goodbye everyone.